Greetings gamers, my name is Anto and today I want to talk about action economy in 5th edition versus Pathfinder 2nd edition. This episode is sponsored by my Twitch channel. I'm going to talk more about that later on. So as you know, I've been diving into Pathfinder 2nd edition recently. I have been reading a lot of the books. I've been digging deep into some of the mechanics. And ever since I started doing that, I've found that I have been really underwhelmed with 5th edition every time I've played it. I recently played as a player in a 5e game, and so many times I felt like I was fighting against the action economy compared to Pathfinder 2nd edition. So I thought I'd make a video kind of comparing and contrasting the two different systems so you can get a sense of what each of them is like, what the differences are, and whether or not you'd be interested in a Pathfinder 2 style 3-action economy. Now, anyone that plays Pathfinder 2nd edition will be very quick to tell you how amazing the 3-action economy is, how much it changes the game, and if you speak to a lot of people, they treat it like it's the best thing since sliced bread. And I want to take a deep dive into that and actually look at the two systems so that you can make your own choice as to whether or not the 3-action economy is something that you're interested in, and whether or not you want to check Pathfinder out if you are currently playing 5th edition. To start with, I want to give you a little bit of an overview. So in 5th edition, the way the action economy works is you have a move action, an action, a standard action, a bonus action, a reaction, and a free action. So there's 5 broad different kinds of actions that you can take, and then each of those has their own individual elements. In Pathfinder 2nd edition, you have a single, 2 and 3 action activation, I think it is called, a reaction, and a free action. So again, both of them have 5 different kind of ways to interact with actions and different categories that you can put your actions into. The real differences come with where different actions fit within that system. So we're going to start by talking about 5th edition, just so we're all on the same page and we understand where things are. So in 5th edition, we'll start with the move action. So I've got a little list here that I'm going to just read off so that we've got a sense of what the move action can do. So with your move action in 5th edition, you can move, climb, jump, swim, drop prone, crawl, or stand up. Each of those has their own kind of little rules attached to them. Some of them impose penalties on how far you can move and things like that, but those are what you can do with your move action. Then with your actual action, you can attack, including a multi-attack if your character has that feature. You can cast a spell. We're going to talk about how you can cast multiple spells in just a minute. You can dash, which allows you to move a second time. You can disengage, which means you don't provoke attacks of opportunity. You can dodge, which means attacks against you have disadvantage. You can help, which grants advantage on ability checks or attack rolls for an ally. You can hide, ready an action to be taken later on in the turn order, search, or use an object. Then we come to bonus actions. So bonus actions tend to be more class-specific things. So your class features will tend to give you access to some bonus actions, but they are probably the most often wasted action in 5th edition, because you only get them if you have a feature that gives you a bonus action, and not everybody gets a bonus action. You can't trade them for actual actions, so you can't do 2 bonus actions. And while you can cast some spells as a bonus action, if you do cast a spell as a bonus action, the only other spell you can cast with your regular action is a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action. So bonus actions occupy this really weird space where most turns, unless your class is built specifically to utilize bonus actions, most turns you probably aren't going to use a bonus action. Then we come to reactions. So a reaction most of the time is going to either be an attack of opportunity, which everyone gets, or casting some kind of reaction casting time spell, so the shield spell, for example. Beyond that, you don't tend to get a lot of uses out of a reaction unless you're using a spell or a class feature that specifies it is a reaction. And then finally, in 5th edition, you get a free action. So when you are moving or performing an action, you can interact with one object. And some of the examples they give there are drawing a weapon, opening a door, taking a potion out of a backpack, or handing an item to another character. So that's our 5e action economy. In most cases, if you are a martial character, your general progression of a combat is going to look a little bit like this. You're going to start off away from the enemy, you're going to run up to them, and you're going to stand next to them and hit them until they die. If they try and move away from you, you'll take an attack of opportunity. Very unlikely you're going to move away from them because you'd have to use the disengage action so that you don't provoke an attack of opportunity, or you'd have to take the hit if you wanted to just move away, and most of the time you're going to want to stand there and hit them until they die anyway. If you are something like a rogue, you might get more use out of your bonus action, using your bonus action to dash or hide or use some of your other class abilities. Same if you're a spellcaster, you might use your movement action to move around. You might cast a cantrip as your action and a bonus action spell, or you might get some reactionary spells. But for the most part, most turns play out broadly the same. You move, you attack. And for a lot of characters, in a lot of turns, in a lot of combat, that is all you're going to be doing. When I was playing as a barbarian a couple of weeks ago, I felt very stifled by this kind of constraint, because I felt like all I was doing was I'd move to an enemy and then I'd stand there and hit them for a little while because that was mechanically the best thing to do, and then they die, and then I'd eventually move again, and I'd just keep doing that. I didn't feel like I had interesting options within the confines of that one-on-one combat or the combat with multiple enemies once I'm in combat to make for an interesting time, because it's almost always better to just attack. That isn't the case for Pathfinder 2nd edition, but before we talk about that, I want to tell you about today's sponsor. So this episode is sponsored by my Twitch channel. I have recently started live streaming over on Twitch again. Every week we're going to be doing some collaborative world building. I'm working on the campaign setting for my next campaign, which I'm going to start in about 6 months. So I am building that up, populating the world, getting all the world building elements of that done, ready to introduce it to my players. And every week we're going to get together and with help from the chat, I build out sections of that world. I've introduced a whole bunch of new features over there, so you can use channel points, which you get just for watching the stream. You can use those to name places, add NPCs, drop monsters in specific parts of the map, and there's a whole bunch of other cool stuff that we can do together. So if that sounds cool to you, we're going to be streaming probably every Sunday night, a nice chill evening of collaborative world building. So head to the link down in the description and drop a follow on the Twitch channel, and I will see you over there live. But for now, back to the video. Okay, so now we know how the 5th edition action economy works. We've got that move action, the standard action, the bonus action, and the reaction. Let's talk about Pathfinder 2nd edition. Now, the big thing everybody talks about when they're talking about Pathfinder 2nd edition is the 3 action economy. But what does that mean? It means that almost every action that you can take in Pathfinder 2nd edition is going to cost either 1, 2, or 3 actions. And every turn, you get 3 actions. A reaction, if applicable, and a free action. What this does is it gives a lot more flexibility to players. So it means that in a lot of turns, your turn will look quite similar to how it does in 5th edition. You might move, attack, or move and attack twice if you are a martial character, or you might move and cast a spell, or cast a spell and dip into cover, anything like that. But because you've got that 3 action economy, your choices expand greatly. A lot of the things that are a standard action in 5th edition just cost 1 action in Pathfinder. This means that you can be really flexible with how you use your options. So let's run through what some of the options are in Pathfinder 2nd edition. So costing just 1 action, we have move or stride. That allows you to move up to your movement speed. We've got the option to crawl, drop prone, escape a grab, interact with an object, leap, search for something, sense someone's motive, stand up from prone, take a 5-foot step, which doesn't provoke an attack of opportunity, Make an attack, a strike. Take cover, which increases your AC bonus. Avert your gaze from creatures that might petrify you. Mount another creature. Point out a hidden enemy to your allies who aren't aware of them. Raise your shield to gain its AC bonus. And then there are a bunch of one-action spells. Now, the biggest difference here comes in the form of martial characters. So for a lot of these actions in Pathfinder 2nd edition, they cost a single action, whereas in 5th edition they consume your entire action, which means that if you wanted to do one of these things that cost one action here, you wouldn't be able to attack. Whereas in Pathfinder 2nd edition, because these things cost one action and you get 3 a turn, you can still attack twice if you want to. One thing that a lot of people who move from 5th edition to Pathfinder might struggle with, though, is the multiple attack penalty. So the way this works is the first attack you make in a round has no penalty. You just roll the d20 and add your usual modifiers. The second attack that you make always has a -5 penalty, or a -4 if you're using certain weapons. And then the third attack that you make in a round has a -10 penalty. This means that if you, as a first level fighter, wanted to run up to someone and hit them 3 times, you could do that, but it's almost never going to be the most optimal choice for your character. At -5, you'll usually be able to get away with and attack twice, that's no problem. And at higher levels, that -10, you might have ways to circumvent it, and you might be able to get away with 3 attacks. But most of the time, you're actually going to be better off doing a different action instead of that third attack. And a lot of the juice in the system, a lot of what makes it mechanically interesting in combat, what makes it narratively interesting, actually comes from skill actions. Now, skill actions are a way for you to use your skills in combat to impact the battlefield in some way, impact your enemies, buff your allies, all those kinds of things. And they're a really useful way of getting a more interesting combat. So I'm going to list out some of the skill actions. First up, we have Recall Knowledge. Now, this allows you to make a check to see what you know about a creature that you're facing. And depending on whether or not you're successful, you might learn some of its mechanical attributes. So you might learn some information about its stats, about its weaknesses, which will allow you and your allies to be able to defeat it more easily. Then we have things like grappling or shoving, which are just single action things, which means that you can make attacks and then shove someone away. Or you can make attacks and try and trip a creature, which will give them penalties. So you can go up to them, try and trip them, which will give them penalties, and then make your attacks, which makes you more likely to hit. Or there's things like disarming a creature, so you can attempt to knock a weapon out of their hand, and if you're successful, you're either going to kind of put them off balance and make them less likely to hit you when they attack, or you're actually going to knock the weapon out of their hand. Or you could create a diversion and be like, look over there, which will make you hidden to another creature, which allows you to go and stab them in the back for a bonus. Or if you are trained in deception, you can feint and make them think that you're going in for an attack that you're not actually, which is going to make them flat-footed, which gives them a penalty to their AC, which makes you, again, more likely to hit. Or my personal favorite, you can use your intimidation to demoralize a target. Basically, you just frighten them in the middle of combat with your prowess, and they get the frightened condition, which has a bunch of penalties for them. And the reason that doing this is more beneficial than just going in and attacking 3 times is because the way crits work in Pathfinder 2nd edition. In 5th edition, if you roll a 20 on an attack roll, you score a critical hit, which means you get to roll your damage dice twice. In Pathfinder 2nd edition, the critical system is a little bit different. Anytime you score 10 or more above the target number that you're trying to do, so if it's a skill check above the DC, or if it's an attack above your target's AC, if you score 10 over that number, that's a critical success. And almost everything that you can do in Pathfinder 2nd edition comes with additional rules for a critical success. So if you try and do a demoralize, for example. You use your intimidation to try and demoralize an enemy. If you get a success, that enemy is frightened. They get the frightened 1 condition, which means they take a -1 to some of their stuff. If you get a critical success, they get the frightened 2 condition, which means they get an even greater penalty. And there are instances all across the rules where getting a critical includes additional rules or more interesting results, and to get that critical, all you need is to score 10 above the target's armor class, which means instead of using that third action to take a -10 to your attack, you're almost always better off using your first action to do something that reduces the enemy stats or buffs you or an ally, so that the next attack that you make is more likely to be a critical. It's one of the reasons why you might see some folks in the Pathfinder 2nd edition community talking about fishing for crits, and the idea is that you do everything you can to increase that critical chance and increase your numbers so that you can get those extra effects. It's why, astonishingly, even though there are a lot more small numbers in Pathfinder 2nd edition, like you might get a +1 from multiple sources, those small numbers make a big difference, because when you make an attack, you've got 2 target numbers, really. You've got the target's AC, which is the target number to hit them, but then you've also got the target's AC +10, which is your critical threshold. So when you make an attack, you will either miss, critically fail, which is much less likely, hit, or critically hit, which means you've got these 2 kind of targets that you're aiming for, and you want to get as close as you can and improve your chances of a critical as much as you can, which is why it's almost never the best option to attack 3 times. Much better to get a critical hit. And then we come on to things that cost 2 actions. Now this is most spells, not all spells, but most spells fall into this category. You can use 2 of your actions to ready an action, which means that you say, right, at some point after some trigger, I'm going to use my reaction to take a single action later on. Then we come to 3 action options. Most of those, like I said, are spells, some other features, but by and large, it's big spells. And then we get to reactions. Now, the biggest difference between Pathfinder 2nd edition and 5th edition when it comes to reactions is not everybody gets an attack of opportunity. Fighters get them by default, some other martial characters get them at later levels, and there are feats that will let you get them, but not everyone has an attack of opportunity, and the same goes for monsters. A lot of monsters don't have attacks of opportunity. This is another piece of the puzzle that makes the action economy in PF2 much more interesting than in 5th edition. In 5th edition, what tends to happen is you have a line of the good guys, a line of the bad guys, they run up to each other, and then no one moves because no one wants to take the attack of opportunity. If things get really dire, you might disengage to get out of there, but for the majority of a combat, you'll have 2 lines of people who run up to each other and start hitting each other. It can be more complicated than that, obviously, but broadly. Whereas in Pathfinder 2nd edition, unless you're a fighter or a martial character who has later gained access to the attack of opportunity, the enemies can zip around you, and you can zip around the enemies. It's much more mobile, which means you can do a lot more interesting things. And with the 3 action economy, quite often you'll have 1 action to spare at the end of your turn, which you can use to do interesting stuff. And when you start putting all these pieces together, that's why you see so many people speak so highly of the action economy in Pathfinder 2nd edition. A lot of what you can do is broadly the same. You know, you can move, you can attack, you can cast a spell, you can interact with things around you. But Pathfinder gives you a lot more choice in how you want to do those things. It doesn't place any restriction on spellcasting. If you have the actions to be able to cast 3 spells in a turn, you cast 3 spells in a turn. If you want to attack 3 times at level 1, ill-advisable, but you can certainly do it, and that's the big difference. 5th edition will say you can't do something, and Pathfinder will say you probably shouldn't, but you can try. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about the comparisons between the action economy in 5e and Pathfinder 2nd edition down in the comments. I'm particularly interested to know, if you are currently a 5th edition player, how would that expanded action economy what sort of interesting things would you do with it? What would you like your character to be able to do in a turn that they currently can't because it's not advisable within, or not possible within, 5th edition's economy. If you enjoy these Pathfinder videos and you want to see more of them, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. These Pathfinder videos are very new for me, and I will keep making them as long as people really enjoy them and resonate with them. So if you do enjoy them, please do let me know in the comments, because it means I will make more of them. But until next time, happy gaming.